In this tutorial for Chapter 10, dealing with photography, we want to take a look at filters. Historically, a filter is a physical device, a specially manufactured glass element that's attached to the front of a camera lens. And there are many different types of filters that do different types of things, but basically a filter would be the very first element on a lens through which the light coming into the camera would have to pass through. And that filter can manipulate and alter the light to cause special effects or to simply change the color temperature. There's lots and lots of different types of filters. As we moved into the digital revolution and began using software programs for photo editing, physical filters, while they're still around and they still serve a purpose, have for the most part been replaced by filters that are applied in post-production on the back end of the photo editing project. And there's an advantage to this because when you use a physical filter like the one pictured here at the point of acquisition, then you're pretty much stuck with what you have acquired. The image is going to be permanently imprinted on the card, and removing the effect of that filter is going to be pretty much impossible unless you have some sort of magic filter that you can apply on in Photoshop. So for the most part, it's a good idea to capture images sort of flat or raw or as they actually would appear without any type of manipulation on the front of the camera, and then use a photo editing program like Photoshop to then apply effects on the back end and to do it non-destructively so that those effects can be changed later and there's not sort of this degree of permanency in relationship to what you're trying to achieve photographically with your images and editing. So let's jump over to Photoshop, our familiar friend for photo editing. And here's an image from the textbook that may look familiar to you. And we're going to use Photoshop filters to alter the visual display of this image. So interestingly enough, when the designers of Photoshop created this program, they decided to use this term filter as a description for a whole category of special effects that can be applied to alter the visual presentation of the image before you. So we can do a lot of things with Photoshop filters. The one thing we want to be careful of, though, is to learn how to apply filters non-destructively. In Photoshop CS6, we have the option of converting our image layer into a smart object and therefore being able to apply filters in such a way that we can later turn them off if we so choose to do so. I would recommend in Photoshop, if you plan to apply a filter to an image or to a design element within the design window, that you convert your object first to a smart filter to do it non-destructively. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Convert for Smart Filters. If I go up now and choose a filter from the many different filter options I have here, and I'm just going to choose this one here under Render, and I'm going to choose to apply a lighting effect. And this is going to bring up a Properties window and a Preview window that's going to allow me to manipulate and control this to accomplish a specific effect. Now, I was in here recently and I applied a sepia tone color filter to this. I'm just going to go ahead and change it back to the default, which is white, and this is a little bit more representative of the color temperature of the original image. But you can see that in this filter I have the ability to control the spill of the light from any point I so choose. Right now, the center of this circular area of light is centered on the nose of the subject. I can move this around, and quite honestly, that's a pretty good location right here between the eyes. And I can control the amount of spill by expanding this circle. And I can go into all sorts of weird shapes. I can make it more elliptical, I can make it more circular. And I can also come over to my Properties window, and here I have choices here where I can control the hotspot. The hotspot is the center area that is going to be the brightest area of the relit image. I can colorize the hotspot, I can add gloss, metallic effects, ambience, and so forth. And really, to get to where you understand what these will do, you just have to try playing with the sliders. Increase or decrease each variable, and it will sort of help to educate you as to what that particular variable does. I'm going to go back and I'm going to add a little bit of color to this just to warm it up some, and we'll go back to our sepia tone somewhere in here, and maybe not quite so dark, and we'll apply that. And I'm going to adjust the hotspot just so you can see the difference. I'm going to increase it, and when I do, you'll notice that the spill in the center of the screen sort of widens out and the hotspot becomes larger. I can go the other way and the hotspot shrinks down to where really just a small circle sort of in the center of the screen is going to be really, really bright. And I can bring down the ambient area. That's going to be the outer ring. and that's going to decide how much of the light from the center of the image actually spills outward. And so this will give me the opportunity to really fine-tune the focus, and I think I'll go with something like that. And when I'm done and I'm happy with this, I can choose OK at the top of the screen, and Photoshop will render out this filter, and there's my finished object. Now the neat thing is, over here in my layers panel, if I zoom in over here and show you, I can expand this, and I now have underneath that layer the Smart Filters layer. And so at any point in time, I can choose the Lighting Effects Smart Filter, and I can turn that off, and then I return to the image as it was in its original form. So this is a non-destructive way of applying filters in Photoshop, and a really handy tool. I can turn it back on, and this gives you the ability again to compare and contrast the effect of the filter when it's turned off versus the effect of the filter when it's turned on. Let me turn it off again, and we'll just go up and I'll show you one more thing in Photoshop that might be of interest to you. I'm going to open up the filter gallery. And the filter gallery is a really helpful interface component of Photoshop that allows you to preview filters before you apply them, because very often you don't know what a filter is going to do until you select it, and then once you select it, you have the ability to manipulate the variables associated with it to mediate or modify the way in which the filter is applied. So in the preview window, I'm going to choose Command minus just to zoom out a little bit on my image, and you can see I currently have the cutout filter applied under the artistic category. And I'm just going to cycle through a few of these just to show you the difference in the effect. It takes a little while for the effect to draw out on screen. Here's one called Film Grain. Film Grain is kind of interesting. It applies that sort of look that you get when you use a high ISO. So if you're in a light sensitive shooting environment and you shoot with a 1600 ISO, you get a more light sensitive image sensor, but what you sacrifice is this variable called graininess. You get a little bit more grain in the image, so we can sort of replicate that by using this filter, and I can increase the grain. Wow, that's really grainy. And I'm not really sure what highlight and intensity do, but I can play with these variables and you can sort of see, wow, they do produce an effect, and I just have to, by trial and error, play around with this till I get the effect that I want to achieve. Well, I haven't actually applied any of these effects yet, which is the really nice part about being in the filter gallery. I can just keep trying filters until I identify the one that I like the most, and then I can go ahead when I'm happy with it and apply it. And there's many different categories. We're still just in the artistic folder. There's one here called brush strokes. There's another one here called distort. We'll choose one of those. And so each of these, while there are names associated with them, you really don't know how the filter is going to look until you apply it, because every filter is going to be a little different in terms of which image you're applying it to. It's going to interact with the pixels within the image that you currently have on the layer that's currently chosen. Alright, well, I'm going to go back to the film grain, and I'm going to take my highlight back up. Actually, I think I'll go the other way with it, maybe down this way. Take down the graininess just a little bit, perhaps. We didn't play with intensity, but I'll bring that down just a little bit as well, and I'll choose OK. So in this particular session, I've applied two filters. One of them is turned off right now. The graininess filter is currently active. I can go over to my layers panel and turn on the lighting effect again, and in doing so I will combine both the film grain filter with the lighting effect filter to achieve this as my final version. So filters are really handy. They're no longer the mechanical apparatus that you put on the front of a lens. In the terminology of digital photo editing, a filter is merely a visual effect. It's something that you apply in post-production during the photo editing stage of a project. Of course, there still are physical filters, and people who spend their life as photojournalists and photographers and so forth usually carry filters around and know how to use them, and there's still a purpose for those. But there's many more things that you can do on the back of a project with the many software tools and plugins and filter additions that you can bring into your program to modify and alter the presentation of a digital image.